The sky wept the day we buried Lloyd. The gray clouds hung so low that they seemed to press down on my shoulders along with my grief. My husband left suddenly. A heart attack took him in an instant. 42 years together, and here I was, alone in our little house on the outskirts of New Braunfels. I'm 67, and I thought I knew everything about Lloyd. Every habit, every thought, every dream. But fate had a surprise for me that turned my life upside down. A week after the funeral, I was invited in by Benjamin Teals, Lloyd's attorney, a man I didn't even know existed. A gaunt man with attentive eyes welcomed me into his office, which smelled of old books and coffee. "Mrs. Haxton," he began, his hands folded on the desk, "your husband left a will you didn't know about." "A will?" I asked, feeling a chill run down my spine. "But we have almost nothing. The house is almost paid off, a little savings." Benjamin sighed quietly and pulled out a folder of papers. "Your husband was a very prudent man, Mrs. Haxton. He spent years secretly investing money and purchased real estate." He handed me a photograph and I gasped. The picture was of a magnificent estate with white columns and huge windows surrounded by cypress trees. "Is this, ours?" My voice trembled. "Yes, Cypress Grove. The estate is valued at about $7 million. Lloyd bought it 5 years ago, paid it off in full, and put it in his name. Now it's yours. I don't remember coming home." The only question on my mind was, why didn't Lloyd say anything? We'd always lived modestly. I saved money on groceries, mended clothes until they fell apart. "And your husband was a millionaire all this time?" At home, I sat in my old armchair and went through our photos together. Here we are young, just married. I worked at the IRS. Lloyd was an engineer at a small manufacturing plant. Nothing to suggest wealth. When did he get rich? Where did the money come from? In a box of papers, I found Lloyd's old notebook. Flipping through the yellowed pages, I came across an entry dated 12 years earlier. "Started the project CR Virginia will never know. It will be a surprise for our old age." CR? Cypress Grove? He'd been planning it for 12 years? A few days later, I decided to go see the estate. The navigator led me to a wrought iron gate surrounded by a high stone wall. With trembling hands, I entered the code on the documents, and the gate slowly opened. A long alley lined with cypress trees led to a 3-story colonial-style mansion. I stopped the car and stared for a few minutes, hesitant to get out. Did this really belong to us? Did it really belong to me? The house inside was even more impressive. Marble floors, spiral staircase, huge windows overlooking the lake. In the master bedroom, I found an envelope with my name written in Lloyd's handwriting. "My dear Ginny, if you are reading this letter, it means I am no longer around. I'm sorry for keeping Cypress Grove a secret all these years. I wanted to surprise you for our 45th wedding anniversary, to show you that all our sacrifices were not in vain. Remember my frequent business trips? I worked on extra projects, invested every extra dollar. I wanted our old age to be spent in a beautiful place where you could read on the porch, and I could fiddle around in the garden. It's all yours now. Dispose of it as you see fit. I have always loved you. Lloyd." I sat on the edge of the bed, the size of half our bedroom in the old house, and cried. He had wanted so badly to give me a gift, but instead he'd left me with a heavy secret and a lot of questions. When I returned home, I was faced with reality. My son Garrett and his wife Willow had come to check up on me. They had gotten married just a month before Lloyd died, and our relationship had been strained ever since. "Mom, where have you been?" Garrett asked, standing in the hallway. "We've been calling all day." "I've been running errands," I said, hanging up my jacket. "Nothing urgent." Willow gave me a hard look. "You look worried, Virginia. Is something wrong?" It wasn't worry in her voice, but curiosity. Willow had always reminded me of a bird of prey, the delicate features, the piercing eyes watching my every move. She worked as an accountant for a construction company, and she always talked about money with a glint in her eye. "No, I'm just tired." I went into the kitchen. "Would you like some tea?" They followed me. Garrett, my only son, 38 years old, seemed to grow more alienated every day since his father's death. A technical writer at an IT company, he'd inherited Lloyd's analytical mind, but not his strength of character. With Willow around, He was becoming the obedient enforcer of her wishes. "We were talking about your house, Mom," Garrett began, sitting down at the table. "It's too big for you alone, and it's expensive to maintain." "My house is fine," I answered firmly. "I can manage." "But why bother?" Willow intervened. "You could sell it, buy a smaller place, put the rest of the money in an account, or invest it." I put the kettle on and turned away to hide my irritation. "I like my house. It's where Lloyd and I lived most of our lives." "Dad was always sentimental," Garrett sighed. "But you have to face the truth. Your pension isn't that big." "I worked at the IRS for 40 years, I reminded him. "And your father and I have always been frugal. Don't worry about my finances." Willow leaned forward, resting her thin hands on the table. "Virginia, Garrett and I are just worried. I mean, Lloyd's inheritance. It was modest, right? This is it." I felt my insides clench. "They're here to talk about money." "Like I said, Lloyd and I have always lived within our means," I said evasively, pouring the tea. "Why are we having this conversation, Willow?" She exchanged a quick glance with Garrett. "We just want to make sure you're okay. We're family, aren't we? Family." That word sounded fake coming out of her mouth, especially when I thought back to a conversation I overheard a month ago. It was at Lloyd's wake. I'd gone out into the garden for some air, walked around the gazebo, and heard Willow's voice. She was on the phone, unaware of my presence. "Yes, Caitlin, the funeral went well. You have no idea how modest the place is. The house is old, the furniture's shabby. After 40 years of work." She giggled. "Garrett says his parents were always frugal to the point of miserliness. I hope the old folks put something away for a rainy day. Otherwise, what was the point of saving like that all their lives?" I froze behind a lilac bush, not believing my ears. No, they hadn't seen the will yet, but I'd insisted Garrett talk to his mother. There can't be nothing left. And if there is, we need to know. Yes, of course, I realize she's elderly and needs money to live on. But Caitlin, let's be realistic. How long does she have left? We've got kids to raise. My hands are shaking. Kids? What kids? They didn't even have kids. I hurried back into the house, feeling nauseous. At that moment, I realized I would never tell them about Cypress Grove. And now they were sitting at my kitchen table, trying to ferret out what I had. Willow was looking at me with poorly concealed impatience, and Garrett seemed confused but determined. "Actually, Mom," he began, "Willow and I have been thinking, maybe you should move in with us. The guest room is almost always available." "Why would I move in with you?" I wondered. "Well, we could keep an eye on you." He didn't look me in the eye. "And you wouldn't have to pay for housekeeping." "I don't need looking after, Garrett. I'm 67, not 97. "Think about it," Willow interjected with a strained smile. "It would be wonderful for our future children to grow up next to their grandmother." "That's sweet," I said, trying to keep my voice steady, "but I prefer my own home." After they left, I sat in silence for a long time. Garrett and I used to have a warm relationship. What happened? Was Willow's influence that strong? Or had Lloyd's death broken something between us? I've decided to keep Cypress Grove a secret, at least until I could sort out my feelings and figure out what to do next. Money changes people, and $7 million can change a lot, especially people like Willow. For the next few months, I lived a double life. To everyone, I was a widowed Virginia Haxton, living modestly on a pension in an old house. 2 or 3 times a week, I made secret trips to Cypress Grove, gradually getting used to the idea that it was my property. I hired a gardener, Otis Fenn, a silent older man who showed up twice a week and tended the extensive grounds. He lived nearby and agreed to look after the house. "I don't like to talk, Mrs. Haxton," he said the first time they met. "Your affairs will remain your affairs." Willow became more and more persistent in her attempts to find out about my financial situation. She would accidentally wander into my office when she came to visit, asking leading questions about Lloyd's bank accounts and investments. One day I caught her rummaging through a drawer of papers. "Oh, I'm sorry," she said, not at all embarrassed. "Garrett had asked me to look for old family photos." "In the financial records drawer?" I raised an eyebrow. "Those are financial records?" She sounded fake surprised. I hadn't noticed. Garrett was growing more and more distant. He didn't call much. He mostly came over with Willow. When we were alone, he seemed nervous. avoided looking me in the eye. I felt a wall growing between us, but I didn't know how to break it down. One evening, the phone rang. It was an unfamiliar number. "Mrs. Haxton?" a man's voice asked. "Yes, that's me. This is Harlan Drew, your neighbor in Cypress Grove. We don't know each other personally, but Otis gave me your number. I'm tense. Why would a gardener give my number to a neighbor? What can I do for you, Mr. Drew?" "Probably nothing, but I thought you should know. There was a woman hanging around your house today. She was asking my gardener who owns Cypress Grove." My heart skipped a beat. Have you seen this woman? Can you describe her?" "Not very well. Slender, dark hair, drove up in a silver sedan. She said she was interested in buying property in our neighborhood." I squeezed the phone so hard my knuckles turned white. "Thank you for the information, Mr. Drew. That's very kind of you." "You're welcome, Mrs. Haxton. We neighbors have to look out for each other." After I hung up the phone, I sank into a chair. Slim, dark hair, silver sedan. Willow had a car just like that. Coincidence? I don't think so. But how did she know about the mansion? I was so careful. That night I couldn't sleep for a long time. My secret was in jeopardy, and I had no idea what would happen next. Spring came early in New Braunfels. The March sun was already warming the earth, and the cypress trees around the estate were beginning to turn fresh green. I loved these mornings in the cypress grove, the silence, punctuated only by birdsong, and the wonderful sense of peace that had been missing lately. Today, I arrived earlier than usual, when the dew was still glistening on the grass. It had been a week since the neighbor's call, but the restlessness wouldn't let go. I kept looking around, checking to see if anyone was following me. Paranoia? Maybe, but my gut told me Willow wouldn't back down. As I slowly made my way around the grounds of the estate, I pondered what to do next. Sell? Move here permanently? Tell Garrett the truth? Each option had its pros and cons. "Good morning, Mrs. Haxton." Otis's voice made me wince. He appeared from behind the hedge, garden shears in hand. "I'm sorry if I startled you." "It's all right, Otis. I was just thinking." He nodded, wiping his hands on his work gloves. "I wanted to tell you that I trimmed the bushes on the south side like you asked, and also—" He hesitated. "I think you should know that someone came by yesterday." My heart skipped a beat. "Came by? Here?" "Not in the house, no. But I noticed footprints on the ground near the east fence, where it's lower, and a piece of cloth on the barbed wire at the top. Looks like someone climbed over." "Did you report it to the police?" Otis shook his head. "Didn't bother the authorities. Nothing was missing as far as I could tell. But I reinforced that area and put up a camera. An old one, but a working one." I smiled gratefully. Otis was a real find, not verbose but attentive and caring. "Thank you, Otis. I appreciate your thoughtfulness." He nodded and went back to work, and I headed toward the house, feeling my anxiety rising. Someone was watching the estate, perhaps even trespassing. Was it a coincidence? Or did Willow really suspect something? In the master bedroom, I opened the safe hidden behind the painting. Another inheritance from Lloyd. It held the most important documents. The title deeds, the insurance, the will, it was all there. I breathed a sigh of relief, but I shouldn't relax. Before I left, I walked around the estate one more time, checking the locks and windows. There were fresh footprints by the eastern fence, a mussed grass, a broken branch. Someone was anxious to find out what lay beyond the high fence of the cypress grove. As I walked back to my usual home, I could feel the tension rising. How long would my disguise last? What if Willow already knew about the estate? How would Garrett react when he found out I'd hidden my father's inheritance from him? As I pulled up to the house, I spotted a familiar silver sedan at the curb. Willow. What's she doing here on a weekday? For all I knew, she was supposed to be at work. I parked and cautiously entered the house through the back door. It was quiet, no sounds of presence. It's weird. A car parked and no one in the house? As I passed the study, I noticed the door was ajar. I remembered closing it before I left. My heart beat faster. Slowly pushing the door open, I peeked inside. It was empty. But something was wrong. My gaze fell on the desk. The drawers were slightly pulled out, the folders not in the order I'd left them. Someone was going through my things. I rushed to the closet where I kept Lloyd's old papers. The big box was still in place, but the lid had been slid off. The inside was a mess. Papers jumbled, some folders had clearly been looked through. I began frantically going through the contents, trying to figure out what was missing. The sound of the front door slamming shut made me freeze. Quick footsteps in the hallway, keys jingling. "Mom, are you home?" Garrett's voice. I straightened up, trying to keep my hands from shaking. "In the study." He appeared in the doorway, looking surprised. "I didn't expect to see you. Thought you were at your book meeting." "It was canceled," I lied. "Why aren't you at work?" "I forgot some important papers." He pointed to the folder in his hand. I stopped by to pick it up. His gaze slid over the open cabinet, the papers scattered about. "Looking for something?" "Yeah, old photos," I said, trying to sound casual. "I wanted to show Martha." Garrett nodded, but there was something in his eyes. Suspicious? Or was it just me? "By the way, Willow and I want to invite you to dinner on Saturday. It's nothing fancy, just family night." "I'd love to," I replied, thinking about the silver sedan outside the house. "Isn't Willow working tonight?" "No, she's at a conference in Austin." He glanced at his watch. "I've got to run. Until Saturday?" "Saturday." When he left, I sank slowly into a chair. Willow's in Austin? Then whose car was parked in front of the house? And who was going through my papers? I went through the papers again, more methodically. And soon I found the missing folder with Lloyd's bank account information. It wasn't anything valuable, just old statements. But the fact that someone had been looking for financial records on purpose alarmed me. Saturday night came all too quickly. I spent 2 days anxiously waiting, trying to figure out what Willow and Garrett knew. I drove to Cypress Grove several times, checking to make sure everything was okay. Otis had installed 2 more perimeter cameras and assured me he would report any suspicious activity. Garrett and Willow's house was in a newer neighborhood, a typical suburban cottage, too big for a family without children. Willow opened the door with a wide smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Virginia, what a pleasure! Come on in, it's almost ready." I walked in, noting to myself the new furniture in the living room, a leather couch that clearly cost more than Garrett's monthly salary. "It's a nice couch," I remarked. "New?" "Yeah, it just arrived last week." Willow ran her hand over the smooth leather. "We decided we deserved a little comfort." "With whose money?" I almost asked, but held back. Garrett came out of the kitchen with a glass of wine. "Mom, I'm glad you came. You look great." That was an exaggeration. I hadn't been sleeping well the last few days, and the circles under my eyes gave away my condition. Dinner was exquisite. Scallops, steaks, expensive wine. Too lavish for an ordinary family evening. I ate in silence, waiting for them to get to the true purpose of this meeting. Willow spoke first as we moved on to dessert. "Virginia, Garrett and I wanted to discuss something important with you. Here we go." I put down my fork and braced myself. "We've been thinking a lot about the future," she continued, "and financial stability, especially now that we're planning children." Garrett gave her a quick glance that I couldn't decipher. "Mom," he coughed, "we think you need to think about long-term planning, about a will, insurance, estate administration." "My will is fine," I replied in a steady voice. "So is the insurance. But you haven't discussed it with us." Willow leaned forward. "This is about the whole family." "Really?" I raised an eyebrow. "I think my will is all about me." "Mom?" Garrett looked embarrassed. "What Willow means is that after Dad, we need to make sure that everything is, properly organized." "Exactly." Willow picked up on that. "I mean, there's no telling what could happen. At your age, Virginia, it's common for people to make not the smartest decisions." I set my glass down so hard that the wine almost spilled out. "What do you mean, Willow?" "Nothing bad," she said with a strained smile. "It's just that a lot of people get more impressionable. They can fall under someone's influence, jump to conclusions, especially in matters of inheritance." "And what makes you think I have any significant inheritance?" My tone turned icy. Garrett and Willow exchanged glances. "We're not talking about anything specific," Garrett began cautiously. "But Dad's always been frugal. There must have been some savings, investments." "Real estate, maybe," Willow added casually. My heart skipped a beat. "They know, or suspect. But how?" "Lloyd left enough for me to live comfortably," I said evasively. "Don't worry about that." But we do worry. Willow put her hand over mine, and I struggled not to pull away. Old people shouldn't make important financial decisions without consulting their families, especially when there's a lot of money involved. I pulled my hand away and straightened up. I'm 67, Willow. I'm not a senile old woman, and I'm perfectly capable of handling my finances without help. Mom, no one's saying you're not doing fine, Garrett interjected. We just want to be in the know, as a family. In the know about what, Garrett? I looked directly at my son. What exactly are you interested in? He looked away. Just, the big picture. Just to know that everything's okay. Everything's perfectly fine. I got up from the table. Thanks for dinner, but I gotta go. I have early plans tomorrow. Are you going somewhere? Willow asked quickly. Does it matter? Just wondering. She shrugged with feigned indifference. Mom, don't leave like that. Garrett stood up. We didn't mean to upset you. I'm not upset, Garrett. I'm just surprised at your sudden interest in my finances. Willow stood up as well, her face taking on a hard expression. Virginia, you may not realize this, but this is about Garrett's future, his father's inheritance, which should rightfully go to him. Willow! Garrett gave his wife a warning look. No, Garrett, stop beating around the bush, she turned to me. We know that Lloyd left more than just this old house, and we think Garrett has a right to know the whole truth. There was a heavy silence in the room. I stared at my daughter-in-law, fighting the urge to tell her what I thought. If you have any specific questions about Lloyd's estate, I said at last, you can ask his attorney. Now, if you'll excuse me, I really must be going. I picked up my bag and headed for the door. Garrett followed me. Mom, please don't be mad. Willow's just worried about money, Garrett. She's worried about the money, not me. That's not true. But there was no confidence in his voice. You're too smart not to see that, I sighed. Your father always thought you let others make decisions for you. I guess he was right. His face contorted with resentment. And you and your father always thought I wasn't good enough, not smart enough, not strong enough. Garrett, that's not true. It is. He lowered his voice. Why do you think he left me nothing, everything for you, nothing for me, didn't even warn me about... He paused, realizing he'd said too much. About what, Garrett? I asked quietly. Nothing, he looked away. It didn't matter. I walked out into the cool night, feeling the anxiety growing inside me. They know something, and that something has to do with Lloyd's inheritance. How far would they be willing to go to get it? When I got home, the first thing I did was check the study. Everything looked untouched, but I didn't trust my first impressions. I methodically went through the folders and drawers, trying to see if anything else was missing. In the lowest drawer of my desk, I kept a folder of information about the estate, copies of the title deeds, attorney contacts, insurance papers. The originals, of course, were in the safe in Cypress Grove, but even the copies could tell me a lot. The folder wasn't there. Panic overwhelmed me. I searched the entire office, checked every possible place, but the folder was nowhere to be found. Someone had taken it, and that someone now knew about Cypress Grove. Without thinking, I grabbed my keys and drove to the estate. It was late afternoon, but I had to make sure everything was okay. As I approached the gate, I noticed it was ajar. My heart hammered in my throat. I definitely remembered closing them in the morning. Driving slowly into the grounds, I stopped and listened. It was silent. Only the wind rustled in the crowns of the trees. The house looked untouched. The dark windows, the locked front door. I walked around, checking doors and windows. Everything was locked. Maybe Otis had forgotten to lock the gate? Unlikely, he was very pedantic. I walked into the house and turned on the lights. Everything seemed fine, but some sixth sense told me someone had been here. Walking through the living room, I noticed a displaced cushion on the couch, as if someone had been sitting on it. In the study, the desk drawer was not fully closed. Walking up to the master bedroom, I headed straight for the safe. My heart pounded frantically as I entered the code. The door opened, and I was relieved to see that the documents were in place. At least the most important things were safe. But something still bothered me. I looked around more closely and noticed the slight smell of perfume, not mine. Someone had definitely been here, and recently. Going downstairs, I checked the back door. The lock looked intact, but there was a faint mark on the handle on the outside, as if someone had tried to open it with gloves on. The ringing of the phone made me jump. It was Otis. Mrs. Haxton, sorry for the late call. I was reviewing the security footage and I noticed something strange. What was it, Otis? A silver car passed the gate 3 times that day, and around 4 o'clock the footage shows a woman entering the grounds. The camera on the east wall has her outside the house. Can you describe this woman? Slender, dark hair, dressed in dark clothing. Can't get much more detail than that because the camera's too far away. Willow. It's gotta be her. But how did she know the gate code? Thank you, Otis. Please be extra careful in the next few days. Change the code on the gate, will you? I already did, Mrs. Haxton, and added another camera at the main entrance. I smiled gratefully, even though he couldn't see it. You're a real treasure, Otis. When I got home past midnight, I couldn't sleep. My thoughts revolved around one question: what to do next? Willow obviously knew about the estate and was willing to go to great lengths to get her share. Garrett seemed to know too, though maybe not all the details. I needed advice. Legal advice from someone I could trust. I thought of Mariah Quall, the lawyer who'd helped handle the probate after Lloyd's death. We weren't close friends, but she had always treated me with respect and understanding. I called her office this morning and made an appointment. It's regarding Lloyd Haxton's estate, I told the receptionist, and I was immediately scheduled for 11 o'clock. Mariah's office was in an old building downtown. She greeted me with a professional smile, but there was genuine concern in her eyes. Virginia, it's good to see you, although the circumstances don't seem to be the most pleasant, do they? I'm afraid so, Mariah. I'm having trouble with Cypress Grove. Mariah Quall's office looked exactly as I'd expected. Austere, functional, with a hint of feminine presence in the form of an orchid on the windowsill and a soft plaid on the back of a chair. Mariah herself, a trim woman of 55 with short graying hair, listened attentively to my story, occasionally making notes in her notebook. So, she summarized when I finished, your daughter-in-law supposedly discovered the existence of the estate, broke into your house to search for documents, and then illegally entered the Cypress Grove property. Is that correct? Yes, although I have no direct evidence, only coincidences and my suspicions. Mariah leaned back in her chair, tapping her pen on her notepad. Virginia, I suggest we hire a private investigator. We need to find out exactly what your daughter-in-law knows and what her plans are. A private investigator? I clutched my bag nervously. Isn't that a little, dramatic? No more dramatic than trespassing on your house and estate, she smiled softly. Believe me, it's better to know what we're dealing with than to guess. I nodded, feeling a mixture of relief and anxiety. Finally, someone was taking my concerns seriously. I have a trusted person, Mariah continued. Bivens, ex-cop, now working as a private investigator. Discreet, efficient, and importantly, well-connected. Okay, I agreed. What do we need to do? I'll call Bivens. You, continue with your normal behavior. Don't let your daughter-in-law know you suspect anything. And please be careful. 3 days later, Mariah called and asked me to come right away. There was an anxiety in her voice that she didn't try to hide. Bivens was a short, stocky man with expressive eyes and deep wrinkles that spoke of a rich life experience. He greeted me with a brief nod and got right to the point. Mrs. Haxton, I'm afraid the situation is more serious than we thought. He opened a folder of photographs. Your daughter-in-law has indeed hired a private detective, one Reiner, not the most law-abiding, if you know what I mean. He showed me some pictures where I recognized Willow talking to an unremarkable man in a gray suit. This Reiner's been following you for at least 2 weeks. Tracked your every move, especially your trips to Cypress Grove. In addition, Bivens turned the page. He conducted, shall we say, an unofficial investigation into your late husband's financial affairs. In what way? I asked, feeling a chill go down my spine. Through his contacts at the bank. Got information on the movement of funds in Mr. Haxton's accounts over the last 10 years. He was particularly interested in large transactions. Is that legal? Not exactly, Mariah interjected. And we can use it against them if we need to. Bivens pulled out another photograph. This was taken yesterday. Your daughter-in-law was meeting with a lawyer, Palmer Wolf. Not exactly the cleanest of reputations, takes on shady cases. In the photo, Willow was sitting in a coffee shop across from a gray-haired man with a predatory profile. They looked to be engaged in a serious conversation. There's something else. Bivens paused. I checked the financial situation of your son and his wife. They're up to their eyeballs in debt. Credit cards maxed out, 2 mortgages, one of which is delinquent, plus a large personal loan taken out about 6 months ago. What? I was shocked. Garrett never said anything about financial problems. According to the paperwork, the debts were mostly Mrs. Haxton's. Expensive purchases, vacations, home renovations. And they want my estate to pay off the debts, I finished, feeling the anger growing inside. I guess so. Bivens nodded. But there's good news. I did a little digging into your daughter-in-law's past. She's not as clean as she wants to appear. He handed me another sheet of information. Willow Sage before she was married. Changed her name at 21, used to be Willow Price. Had trouble with the law, petty fraud, charges were dropped. Worked for 3 accounting firms, 2 of which she left after accusations of unethical behavior. In the last firm, I was involved in a strange story about a client's inheritance. Nothing was proved, but the residue remained. I stared at the papers, unable to believe my eyes. This couldn't be the Willow my son had chosen, but the facts spoke for themselves. Does Garrett know about this? I doubt it, Bivens said. She was very careful to cover her tracks. It took a lot of connections for me to dig up that information. What do we do? I turned to Mariah. The first step is to secure your property, she said firmly. I've already prepared documents that prohibit any transactions with Cypress Grove without notarized authorization from you. Then I think you should talk to your son, alone, find out what he knows and how involved he is in his wife's plans. I doubt he'll agree to a conversation without her, I sighed. Try, Mariah squeezed my hand. Maybe he's just confused and needs your help. I called Garrett the next day and suggested we meet for lunch. To my surprise, he agreed without hesitation, only asking me to pick a place away from their neighborhood to talk quietly. We met at a small Italian restaurant on the outskirts of town. Garrett looked tired and tense, dark circles under his eyes. It's been a long time since we've had lunch together, I said, trying to make conversation casual. Yeah, probably since last Christmas. He smiled weakly. How are you, Mom? Better than you, by the look of you. Something wrong, Garrett? He looked away, twirling the water glass in his hands. It's nothing, just work, stress, and debt, I added quietly. His eyes widened. What? Garrett, I know about your financial problems, the loans, the late payments. He turned pale and looked around as if afraid someone was listening. How did you find out? Does it matter? I leaned forward. Why didn't you say anything? I could have helped. Help? He grinned bitterly. With what? With my modest pension? Not only that, I watched his reaction carefully. I have savings. Something else. The Cypress Grove, he said so quietly that I barely heard him. So, you know. Garrett nodded without looking up. How long ago? About a month. Willow found some papers in Dad's desk when she was helping you clean. It mentioned an estate. So instead of asking me directly, you decided to spy on me? Hire a detective? Break into my house? I didn't, he stammered. It was Willow's idea. She said you wouldn't tell the truth anyway. And of course you believed her. Look, Mom, we're desperate. These debts. I didn't realize there was so much. Willow handled the finances and I just trusted her. And let you spend more than you made. He clenched his fists on the table. You don't understand. Willow was used to a certain standard of living. Her past husband. Past husband? I interrupted. What past husband are we talking about? Garrett looked confused. I thought you knew. Willow had been married before to some businessman. They divorced a year before I met her. I mentally flagged another lie. Bivens never said anything about a previous marriage. And this businessman was rich? Enough to get Willow used to a nice life. Garrett looked guilty. I wanted her to be happy with me, so she wouldn't feel like she'd taken a step back. And that's why you got into debts you can't pay off. I thought I could handle it. He raised his voice, attracting the attention of the neighboring tables, and then he lowered his tone. I was counting on promotions, bonuses, and then the layoffs started, and, everything went downhill. I looked at my son and my heart ached. When did he turn into this weak, scared man? Where was the cheerful, confident boy that Lloyd and I loved so much? Garrett, why didn't you come to me as soon as the trouble started? I'm your mother. I'm always there for you. Willow said it was humiliating to ask my parents for help at my age, that we should do it on our own. And then she found out about the estate and decided it was the solution to all problems. He nodded, looking away. She says it's not fair, that father should have divided the inheritance between us. What do you think? I don't know. He looked me straight in the eye for the first time during the conversation. Why did he do that, Mom? Why leave everything to you and nothing to me? Garrett, the estate was a surprise to both of us. He was going to show it off for our 45th anniversary. I sighed. And I'm sure it was his plan for you to use it too. To make it a place for family gatherings, for celebrations. But he left it up to me to decide how and when that would happen. And you decided not to say anything. After you overheard Willow discussing old people's inheritance? Yeah, I decided not to say anything. Would you have done anything differently if you were me? Garrett lowered his head. She's not as bad as you think she is. She's just really worried about the debt. We could lose the house, the cars, everything. How much do you owe? He gave me a number that almost took my breath away. And how does Willow plan on getting my estate? Garrett looked even more confused. She talked to a lawyer. He said it was possible to file a lawsuit to split the inheritance, that there are precedents where a court has found it unfair to leave the entire estate to a spouse, bypassing the children. Especially if the spouse is not old and perhaps not mentally healthy? I guessed. His face flashed. Mom, I never said you were, but Willow did. I clasped my hands together to keep them from shaking. Garrett, don't you see what's happening? She's manipulating you, pulling you into a scam that could end very badly for both of you. It's not a scam, he was defending himself. This is about justice. It's about the fact that your father probably didn't want just you to have everything. Lloyd left a will, Garrett, clear and unambiguous. His entire estate passes to me, and when I die, to you. That was his choice. After you die, he muttered. How long do we have to wait? 5 years? 10, 20? We'll be bankrupt by then. I looked at him with growing horror. Was my son really discussing how long I had left to live? I never thought I'd hear you say those words, I said quietly. Garrett looked ashamed. I'm sorry, I didn't mean it like that. It's just the situation. Garrett, listen to me carefully. I leaned closer. I know about Willow's past. Her legal troubles, her name changes, her questionable history at previous jobs. I know she's been lying to you. His face turned pale. What is this crap? Willow never... I have proof, and if she keeps coming after me or trying to take the estate, I'll use it. Believe me, it won't end well for her or you. Are you, threatening us? His voice shook with resentment and anger. No, son, I'm trying to protect myself and you from a man who is using you both. Willow doesn't love you, Garrett. She loves money and status, and she'll do anything for it. You've always hated her. He pushed his plate away. From the beginning, never gave her a chance. Garrett. No, now you listen. He leaned forward, anger burning in his eyes. You never understood me or your father. Always in control, always knew best. Why do you think father kept the estate a secret? Because you wouldn't have allowed him such extravagance. You'd always tell him to save money, to put it away. That's not true, and you know it. It's true. You and your father always treated me like a child who couldn't make decisions. Always thought I wasn't good enough. And now you're accusing my wife of some crime without a shred of proof. I have proof, Garrett. What proof? Rumors? Gossip? He stood up. You know what, Mom? I'm not listening to this. We're going to file a lawsuit and we're going to let the courts decide who's right. Garrett, please sit down. Let's talk calmly. There's nothing to talk about. You made your choice. I made mine. He threw the lunch money on the table and walked out without looking back. I remained seated, feeling the emptiness growing inside. Had I really lost my son? Had this woman managed to take such a hold of his mind and heart? That evening, I called Mariah and told her about the meeting. He's completely under her influence, I said tiredly. And they do plan to sue. Don't worry, Virginia. Legally, their position is very weak. Your husband's will is impeccable. There's no grounds for contesting it. Willow's talking about some kind of precedent. Let her talk, Mariah said with confidence. Bivens is still watching them. I want to know their every move. In the meantime, what am I supposed to do? Live your life as usual, but be very careful, especially with documents, with phone calls, and under no circumstances sign anything they offer you. After the talk, I sat in the living room for a long time, looking at old photographs. Here's Garrett at 5 years old, with a wide smile and a missing front tooth. Here's the three of us on a picnic, Lloyd laughing, hugging us both. When did it all go wrong? When did my loving son turn into this stranger willing to fight me for money? The doorbell rang, snapping me out of my reverie. It was late, almost 10 o'clock in the evening. Who could have come at this hour? Through the peephole, I saw Willow. She was standing on the doorstep, tapping her foot impatiently. I didn't want to open the door, but I knew this conversation had to happen sooner or later. Willow, I opened the door. What a surprise. I need to talk to you. She slipped past me into the hallway without waiting for an invitation. About your meeting with Garrett today. Come on in, I suggested sarcastically, closing the door. She walked into the living room and stopped, arms crossed over her chest. What did you say to him? He came home not himself. I told him the truth, about the estate, about Lloyd's will, and about you, Willow. Or should I call you Willow Price? Her face twitched, but she quickly regained control. I don't know what you mean, she shrugged. I'm not here to discuss myself. I want to know why you kept his father's inheritance from Garrett. I didn't hide anything. The estate was left to me, not Garrett, and the decision of when and how to report it was mine too. That's convenient, she grinned, especially when you're talking about $7 million. It's not about the money, Willow. It's about what? The principle? Pride? She came closer. Or is it that you just don't want to share? You want to control everything until your last breath? I want to protect what's rightfully mine, and I know why you need that money. To pay off the debts you've made, Willow is visibly tense. Our finances are none of your business, and my estate is none of yours. But that didn't stop you from breaking and entering, did it? I don't have time for these games, she said offensively. Here's how it's going to be. Either you agree to a fair division of the inheritance, or we go to court. And believe me, I'll do everything I can to prove that you're unfit to administer such an estate. On what grounds? Well, she smiled, and there was nothing kind in that smile. An elderly widow, recently lost her husband, emotionally unstable, with signs of paranoia and incipient dementia. The judge would listen. I felt a wave of anger rising inside. Are you threatening me? I'm offering you a way out, Virginia. Simple and painless. Share what should be Garrett's, and we all win. And if I refuse? Then there will be a war. Her eyes narrowed. And believe me, it's not the kind of war you want to fight at your age. I straightened up, looking her straight in the eye. Willow, or whatever your real name is, I worked for 40 years in the IRS. I've seen worse crooks than you, and I'm not afraid of war. She looked surprised for a moment, but quickly pulled herself together. We'll see. She headed for the door. You have a week to make a decision, then we act. Don't bother counting to 7, I replied. My answer is no, and it won't change in a week or a month. You'll regret it. She threw over her shoulder and walked out, slamming the door loudly. I sank slowly into the chair, feeling my hands shaking. This was a declaration of war, and I wasn't sure I was ready for battle. But one thing I knew for sure. I would not let this woman take what was rightfully mine, not just for my own sake, but for the memory of Lloyd, who had so carefully planned this inheritance. In the morning, I called Mariah and told her about the night's visit. She openly threatened me, I said. Talked about dementia, about a trial, about proving I was incapacitated. This is serious, Mariah's voice sounded worried. Virginia, I think we need to be proactive. There's something we can do. It's been a week of relative quiet since Willow's visit. No calls, no visits. Garrett stayed in touch, as if our conversation at the restaurant had been our last. I kept checking my phone to see if I'd missed a message, if there was a missed call. But the screen remained blank. Mariah wasted no time. We met the day after Willow's visit, and she presented me with a whole defense plan. We'll prepare documents to prove your competency, she said, going through the papers. A doctor's note, testimonials from friends and acquaintances. I've also contacted a financial advisor who is willing to certify that your estate decisions are completely rational. Is it really that serious? I asked, uncomfortable at the thought of having to prove the obvious, that I was sane. Unfortunately, yes. Mariah looked worried. Willow had found a weakness. If they prove you're incapacitated, even temporarily, the court can appoint a guardian to administer the estate. And guess who the first candidate would be? Garrett, I sighed. Exactly. And given Willow's influence, she'll have control of the estate. Thursday morning, I drove to Cypress Grove. Otis met me at the gate, his normally unruffled face looking worried. There were intruders here again yesterday. He pointed to the east side of the fence. 2. A man and a woman. The camera picked them up around 3 o'clock in the afternoon. They weren't trying to break in, just taking pictures of the house from different angles. Did you recognize them? Same woman as last time. I've never seen the man before. Tall, gray-haired, business suit. Willow and maybe the same lawyer, Palmer Wolf. They were getting ready for their next move. When I got home, I found a message from Garrett on my answering machine. His voice sounded tense and formal. Mom, we need to talk. We're coming over tomorrow at 2 o'clock in the afternoon. It's important. We, not I. So he's coming with Willow. And maybe not just her. I called Mariah immediately. They're going tomorrow, I said without preamble. 2 o'clock in the afternoon. I'll be at your place at 1:30, she answered without hesitation. Don't worry, Virginia. We're ready. The night passed restlessly. I tossed and turned, trying to sleep, but my thoughts kept coming back to the meeting. What are they up to? How far are they willing to go? Mariah arrived right on time. Her presence immediately gave me confidence, taut, collected, clear-eyed, and firm-voiced. She exuded a calm strength. At exactly 2 o'clock, the doorbell rang. I took a deep breath, squared my shoulders, and went to open the door. There were 3 people on the doorstep. Garrett looking pale and tense, Willow with a predatory smile on her thin lips, and a tall, gray-haired man in an immaculate gray suit, undoubtedly Palmer Wolf. Mom, Garrett nodded without looking me in the eye. May I come in? Of course. I stepped back, letting them into the house. Come into the living room. I have a guest too. Willow visibly tensed when she saw Mariah sitting in a chair with a file on her lap. Who the hell is that? She asked sharply. Mariah Quall, my lawyer, I answered calmly. And you must be Mr. Wolf? The gray-haired man nodded, his cold eyes sliding over me appraisingly. That's right, Mrs. Haxton. Palmer Wolf, your son and his wife's attorney. What's the reason for this visit? I asked, sitting down across from them. Willow glanced at Wolf, and he nodded, pulling a file folder out of his briefcase. Mrs. Haxton, we're here to discuss your late husband's estate, specifically the Cypress Grove estate, which we've learned was acquired by Mr. Haxton in secret from his family and left to you in his will. Nothing was done secretly from the family, Mariah interjected. Minus Mr. Haxton had every right to dispose of his property as he saw fit, and he chose to leave everything to his wife, which is standard practice. Under normal circumstances, perhaps, Wolf agreed, but in this case, the circumstances are unusual. Mr. Haxton concealed the existence of a significant asset not only from his son, but also from his wife. That calls into question the transparency of his intentions. He was going to tell me about the estate on our 45th anniversary, I said. Unfortunately, he didn't live to see it. That's a convenient theory, Willow said. Where's the proof? The letter Lloyd left me at the estate, I said flatly, which I could produce to the court if I needed it. Wolf frowned slightly, clearly not expecting that answer. In any case, he regrouped quickly, there is the matter of a fair division of the inheritance. Garrett is Mr. Haxton's only son and, according to the law, is entitled to a share in his father's inheritance. Only if there were no will, Mariah parried. But there is a will, and it is perfectly clear. The entire estate goes to Virginia Haxton, without any conditions or reservations. Wills can be contested, Wolf smiled, showing perfectly straight teeth, especially if there is reason to believe that the deceased's will was distorted or that he was not fully aware of the consequences of his instructions. Do you have such grounds? Mariah asked, raising an eyebrow. We're working on it, Wolf answered evasively. But there is another aspect of the case. Mrs. Haxton's ability to manage such a significant asset as a $7 million estate. I tensed, sensing they were getting close to the main point. What's wrong with my ability? I asked bluntly. Wolf opened the folder and pulled out several sheets. Mrs. Haxton, we have reason to believe that since your husband's death, you've been experiencing a severe emotional crisis that is affecting your cognitive function and your ability to make sound financial decisions. What the hell is that? I was outraged. That's a serious accusation, Mr. Wolf, Mariah said coldly. What is it based on? The family's observations. He nodded toward Garrett and Willow. It's also based on the opinion of a specialist. What kind of expert? I turned to my son. Garrett, what is he talking about? Garrett looked terribly confused, but Willow answered for him. Dr. Shields, the psychiatrist. He analyzed your behavior over the last few months based on our descriptions: secrecy, paranoia, unfounded accusations, emotional instability, all pointing to post-traumatic stress disorder complicated by early-onset dementia. That's absurd. I could barely contain my anger. No doctor can diagnose a man he hasn't even seen. He's seen enough evidence, Willow insisted. Your behavior speaks for itself. Mariah pulled several documents out of her folder and placed them on the table in front of Wolf. First, the report of Dr. Foster, the 30-year neurologist who had examined Mrs. Haxton last week. No signs of dementia, cognitive impairment, or emotional instability. Wolf took the document, gave it a quick glance, and frowned. Second, Mariah continued, a report from a financial consultant attesting to the rationality of all of Mrs. Haxton's financial decisions over the past year. Third, testimony from 6 people, including her former co-workers and neighbors, about her adequate behavior and clear mind. Willow was visibly nervous, her fingers rubbing the edge of her blouse. It doesn't mean anything. Our experts... And finally, Mariah pulled out the last document, a private investigator's report detailing all the illegal acts you, Mrs. Haxton, committed against my client. Breaking and entering, trespassing, identity theft, all of which are felonies, by the way. Willow turned pale but quickly pulled herself together. It's slander, she turned to Wolf. They can't prove it. They can, Mariah said calmly. Surveillance footage, fingerprints, witness statements. More than enough for the police. Wolf tapped his fingers thoughtfully on the folder, clearly reconsidering strategy. It's an interesting twist, he said finally, but it does not waive our client's right to a portion of his father's inheritance, which is clearly defined in the will, Mariah reminded him. And I urge you to familiarize yourself with the state law on attempted inheritance fraud. Section 276, if I'm not mistaken. Very interesting reading. A tense silence hung in the room. Garrett looked lost. Willow looked furious. Wolf looked thoughtful. I propose a compromise, he finally said. Minus Mr. Haxton relinquishes his claim to the estate on the condition that Mrs. Haxton execute the deed to her son upon her death. No right of sale or alienation. It's already in my will, I said. Garrett is already my only heir. But you can change your will at any time, Willow pointed out. Can't I change it now? I raised an eyebrow. What was the point of this compromise? It's to make Lloyd Haxton's will legally binding, Wolf explained. To avoid possible changes in the future. You mean so I can't disinherit Garrett for that sneaky attempt to incapacitate me? I looked at my son, but he was still avoiding my gaze. We will not accept such a compromise, Mariah said firmly. My client has every right to dispose of her property as she sees fit. And if your clients continue these pressure attempts or use illegal methods again, we will go to the police and file a civil suit. You wouldn't dare, Willow hissed. He's your son. That's why it pains me so much to see you manipulate him, I said, using him against me. No one's using anyone, Garrett protested, finally raising his voice. Mom, look, we just want justice. Your father left you a fortune and you kept it from me. Your son. I was going to tell you, Garrett, when I'm ready, when I knew how best to handle this inheritance. But Willow didn't give me that opportunity. Don't blame it on Willow, he raised his voice. She's the only one who really cares about my future, unlike you and Dad. Garrett, I tried to take his hand, but he pulled away. Your father and I always wanted the best for you. Then why didn't he leave me anything? There was a lingering resentment in his voice. Why didn't he even tell me about the estate? Didn't he trust me? He wanted it to be a surprise for both of us, I sighed. He wrote in the letter that he dreamed of you coming to the estate with your family, of grandchildren running around. Lies. Willow cut Willow off. Another lie to justify her greed. Wolf closed the folder and stood up. I can see that we've reached an impasse. My clients offered a reasonable compromise that was rejected. Now I'm afraid we'll have to settle this matter in court. You'll lose, Mariah said firmly. And you'll only embarrass your clients. We'll see, Wolf nodded at me. Mrs. Haxton, think again. Family proceedings are always painful for all parties, especially for people your age. For people my age, Mr. Wolf, I stood up. The most painful thing is betrayal by loved ones, and I can handle the trial somehow. Willow stood up, eyes blazing with rage. You're going to regret this, Virginia. We'll prove you incompetent, and you'll lose everything. Write that threat down, Mariah, I said calmly. It'll come in handy in court. Garrett was the last to rise, still not looking at me. Come on, Garrett. Willow grabbed his arm. There's nothing more for us to do here. He turned around at the door, though, and in his eyes I saw a mixture of hurt, anger, and regret. Regret? I thought you loved me, Mom, he said quietly. But now I see I was wrong. The door closed behind them, and I sank slowly into the chair, feeling my strength draining away. You did well, Virginia, Mariah said, sitting down beside me. They were bluffing, and you knew it. I'm not sure Garrett was bluffing, I shook my head. He really believes I betrayed him. Willow did a good job on him, Mariah sighed, but the facts are on our side. They have no legal grounds to challenge the will or your capacity. What now? I asked. Now we wait for their next move. Mariah squeezed my hand. And prepare for battle. 2 weeks after Willow and Garrett's visit with their lawyer, I received official notice that they had filed a lawsuit in court. The main demands: to invalidate Lloyd's will as it relates to the estate and to establish temporary guardianship over my financial affairs. Mariah had warned me it would come to this, but seeing those words in black and white still hurt. They're bluffing, Mariah said when I called her. Legally, their position is very weak, but they're hoping you'll get scared and agree to their terms. I'm not scared, I replied, though my insides clenched at the thought of a public trial. But it hurts me that Garrett would do such a thing. He's confused, Virginia, and he's under the influence of his wife. But I'm not giving up on finding dirt on your daughter-in-law. There's something interesting about her past employment. What's that? Bivens found out that Willow worked at Higgins & Associates, an accountancy firm, where she handled the affairs of one Robert Dunford, a wealthy widower. After his death, questions arose regarding changes to his will made shortly before his passing. The changes, surprisingly, included a large sum left to a faithful assistant, Willow Price, as she was then known. And what happened? The case didn't go to trial. Bivens is trying to find out the details, but it seems that the Dunford heirs settled privately with the firm. After that, Willow quit her job and changed her name. It could be a coincidence, I said, though my gut told me otherwise. It could be. But Bivens keeps digging. If we find evidence of fraud, it will change the situation completely. Over the next week, Mariah and I prepared for the preliminary court hearing. I underwent a full medical examination, including cognitive function tests, which of course showed that there was nothing wrong with my psyche. We collected testimonials from my coworkers and neighbors attesting to my adequacy and mental clarity. Mariah also prepared a statement about Willow's illegal actions, breaking into my house and estate following me. One evening, as I sat in my living room going over papers, the doorbell rang. It was late, about 9 p.m., and I wasn't expecting guests. Cautiously approaching the door, I asked, "Who's there?" "It's me, Mom," Garrett's voice, alone, without Willow. I opened the door, ready for another confrontation, but all I saw was a tired, exhausted man. "Can I come in?" he asked quietly. I needed to talk. I let him inside, watching his movements warily. He walked into the living room and sat on the couch, wrapping his arms around his head. "I don't know what to do," he said after a long silence. This has gone too far. Where's Willow? I asked, sitting down across from him. At home. She doesn't know I'm here. He looked up at me, and I could see the desperation in his eyes. Mom, I think I've made a terrible mistake. What kind of mistake? There were several. I couldn't hold back the sarcasm. I didn't want all this. He ran his hand over his face. The trials, the accusations. Willow convinced me that it was the only way to get justice, that my father would want me to get my share of the inheritance. And now you think differently? I don't know what to think. He looked truly lost. I overheard Willow on the phone today. She was talking about the estate, about how she plans to sell it once she gets control. Sell it? I was surprised. But didn't you want to live there? I did. And all she wants is money. His voice trembled. She talked to a realtor, discussed the possible price, the commission. She didn't even let me know. I remained silent, giving him a chance to speak. One more thing. He lowered his voice, as if he was afraid of being overheard. I found the documents hidden in her drawer. There was an old birth certificate for Willow Price and some name change papers, and a copy of a non-disclosure agreement with Higgins and Associates. What do you make of that? I don't know what to think. He jumped up and started pacing around the room. I feel like a complete idiot. She said she changed her name after the divorce to start a new life, but now, I'm not sure I can trust her. Garrett, I leaned forward. There's something you need to know about Willow, about her past. So I told him everything Bivens had found out, about the suspicious changes in Dunford's will, about the sudden dismissal, about the name change right after that scandal. Garrett listened, and with every word, his face grew paler and paler. I don't want to believe it, he whispered at last. But it all fits too well. Bivens is still investigating, I said. Soon we'll have all the evidence, and then you'll have to drop the suit or it'll all come out in court. Willow will never agree to that, he shook his head. She's too far gone. What about you? I looked at my son carefully. Are you willing to continue this war knowing it's based on lies? He remained silent, staring at the floor. Finally, he raised his head and asked quietly, What should I do, Mom? In that moment, he was my little boy again, confused and looking for help. But I couldn't just let it all go and forgive. It's your choice, Garrett. But if you want to make things right, start with the truth. Talk to a lawyer. Tell him what you found out about Willow. And most importantly, think about what you really want, money or family. 3 days later, the day before the preliminary hearing, Bivens called with startling news. I found a former Higgins and Associates clerk, he said without preamble. He's willing to testify that he saw Willow forge Dunford's signature on the changes to the will. He'd kept quiet because the firm had paid him a non-disclosure fee. But now that so many years had passed, he was willing to talk. I immediately called Mariah and relayed the information. This changes everything, she said, satisfied. Now we have leverage. I don't want to blackmail, I objected. I just want them to leave me alone. Sometimes blackmail is the only language people like Willow understand, Mariah sighed. But it's up to you. The morning of the hearing, the day of the hearing, the phone rang. It was Woof. Mrs. Haxton, his voice sounded unusually conciliatory. I'm calling to inform you that my clients would like to withdraw the suit and reach an out-of-court settlement. Is that so? I tried to remain calm. And what was the reason for this sudden change? New circumstances, he answered evasively. Could we meet at my office today to discuss the details? I'll be there with my lawyer at 11, I said, and hung up. Mariah met me outside Woof's office, an elegant building in the city's business district. Waiting for us inside were Woof, Garrett, and to my surprise, Willow, who looked like she'd swallowed a lemon. So, Woof began after everyone was seated, my clients are prepared to withdraw all claims to the Cypress Grove estate and Mrs. Haxton's other property. In return, they ask only for written confirmation that upon Mrs. Haxton's death, the estate will pass to her son, Garrett Haxton. I've already said that's in my will, I replied. But now I'm not sure I want to leave it that way. Mom, Garrett exclaimed. After everything that's happened, I looked him straight in the eye. Do you really think you deserve an inheritance? Mrs. Haxton, Woof interjected, I understand your feelings, but let's try to compromise. My clients admit that they have acted hastily. Hasty? I raised an eyebrow. They accused me of incapacity, tried to take my property, broke the law by invading my home and estate. And all of this is in haste. We made a mistake, Garrett said quietly. I made a mistake. Willow gave him an angry look but didn't say anything. Why did you suddenly decide to withdraw the suit? I asked bluntly. Did it have something to do with Higgins and Associates and Robert Dunford? Willow paled dramatically, her hands trembling. I don't know what you mean, she said with feigned indifference. Really? Mariah intervened. What about the former clerk who saw you forge your signature on the will? He's willing to testify. That's a lie, Willow exclaimed. Nobody saw anything because nothing happened. Calm down, Mrs. Haxton. Wolf put a hand on her shoulder. This has nothing to do with our present case. It is if it's a question of character and intent, Mariah objected, especially in light of the allegations of inheritance fraud. There was a heavy silence in the room. Garrett looked at his wife with an expression of shock and disgust. Is it true? He asked quietly. Did you really forge the will? Of course not, she exclaimed. It was all your mother's idea to turn you against me. We have proof, Mariah said calmly. And a witness. If this goes to trial, it'll all go public. Willow jumped up suddenly, her face contorted with rage. You! She jabbed her finger at Garrett. You told them everything, going through my things, spying on me. I didn't... He started, but she didn't let him finish. I knew you were weak, but I didn't think you were a traitor. She grabbed the bag. I'm not going to listen to this. Do whatever you want. And she ran out of the room, slamming the door loudly. Wolf coughed, clearly embarrassed by what was happening. I think we should take a break, he said. Minus Mr. Haxton. Perhaps you'd like to speak to your wife? Garrett did not move from his seat. He sat with his head down and looked completely lost. No, he said at last. I think it's clear now. He looked up at me, and I could see the pain and remorse in his eyes. Mom, I don't know what to say. I've been such a fool. Yes, you were, I agreed without gloating. But the question is, what are you going to do now? I want to make things right if it's not too late, he said, stepping forward. Drop the lawsuit, of course. I think I need to have a serious talk with Willow. About our marriage. That's your decision. I didn't want to intrude on his personal life, though I was inwardly relieved. But as far as you and I are concerned, I don't know, Garrett. You hurt me a lot. I know. He lowered his eyes. And I'm not apologizing. I'm just, a chance to try to make things right. A week later, the suit was officially withdrawn. Garrett signed a document renouncing any claim to the estate during my lifetime. I, in turn, confirmed that he remained my heir, but with a caveat. If he ever tried to challenge my right to dispose of the estate, he was automatically disinherited. I hadn't heard from Willow. Garrett had moved into a small apartment and filed for divorce. He called every day, asking how I was feeling, telling me how he was doing. I answered politely, but with restraint. The wound was too fresh. One evening, I sat on the veranda of Cypress Grove, watching the sun set over the horizon. Otis had finished his work in the garden and came over to say goodbye. Good evening, Mrs. Haxton, he said, taking off his work gloves. The roses are going to be especially beautiful this year. Thank you, Otis, I smiled. For everything. He nodded, realizing I didn't just mean the roses. You deserve peace, Mrs. Haxton, and happiness. After he left, I thought for a long time about what had happened in the last few months. My son's betrayal, my daughter-in-law's greed, how close I came to losing everything Lloyd had left me. But also about the unexpected support I'd found in Mariah and Otis, even in Bivens. The next day I called Garrett. I'm moving to the mansion, I said without preamble. For good. That's wonderful, Mom, he said after a pause. You deserve to live in a beautiful place. I'm selling the old house, I continued. It's too big for one person and there are too many memories in it, not all of them pleasant. I understand. His voice was quiet. Can I come sometime? To see the estate? I wondered. Part of me wanted to forgive him, to let him back into my life. But another part of me remembered the pain of betrayal, remembered how easily he'd let Willow manipulate him, how quickly he'd turned his back on his mother for money. Not now, Garrett, I said finally. I need time, a lot of time. I understand, he repeated, and I'll wait as long as it takes. After we talked, I went out into the Cypress Grove garden and wandered the winding paths for a long time. Lloyd had created a paradise here, with fountains, gazebos, benches in the shade of the trees. He dreamed that we would enjoy it together. Well, life has taken a different course, but maybe I can still find the peace and happiness Otis spoke of here? Not the way Lloyd had planned, but in his own way. A month later, I moved completely into the estate. I sold the old house to a young couple with children. They were glowing with happiness as they signed the papers, and I felt satisfied to see that there would be life and joy in the house again. Mariah visited me often, and we became real friends. She introduced me to her circle of friends, interesting, educated people with whom it was a pleasure to spend time. Gradually, Cypress Grove was filled with new voices, new memories. I started doing charity work, using part of my funds to help lonely elderly people. I opened a small library on the estate where children from the local school came once a week for reading lessons. Garrett called every week, but I still kept my distance. Willow had disappeared from town after the divorce, and no one knew where she'd gone. Frankly, I wasn't interested. One day, while sorting through Lloyd's old papers, I found another letter tucked away in a book. "Read it when you're ready to start a new chapter," the inscription on the envelope read. "My dear Ginny," Lloyd wrote, "if you are reading this, it means you have already settled into Cypress Grove and, I hope, have come to love it as much as I have. I dreamed that we would grow old here together. But if fate has decreed otherwise, know that this house is more than just walls and a roof. It is a symbol of my love for you, my faith in you, in your strength and wisdom. You've always been stronger than me, Ginny. Smarter, more determined. You'll get through anything, I know you will. And you'll find your way to happiness, even if I'm not around. Live life to the fullest, my love. Don't look back. And remember, no matter what happens, I'm always with you. Always loving you, Lloyd." I clutched the letter to my chest, feeling tears run down my cheeks. But they weren't tears of grief, more like tears of release. That evening, I sat on the veranda watching the sunset and thought about my life. About what I had lost, my husband, my trust in my son, my illusions of marital happiness. But also what I had gained, this beautiful home, new friends, a new understanding of myself and my power. The future lay before me, not as I had once imagined, but perhaps no less meaningful. I was ready for it. Ready for a new chapter of my life, without toxic relationships, without manipulation, without betrayal. In Cypress Grove, I found not only a roof over my head, but a new me. A woman who is not afraid to stand her ground, who values sincere relationships and doesn't tolerate falsity. A woman who could finally live for herself and not for others. And in that, perhaps, was Lloyd's most precious gift. The freedom to be herself and make a life by her own rules. I didn't know if I could ever fully forgive Garrett, but I knew for sure that I would never again let anyone manipulate me or try to take away what was rightfully mine. This was my Cypress Grove, my life, and I intended to live it as I saw fit.